Hello and welcome to the Next Generation Nerds. Thank you so much for the recent support on the last subclass series. I'm planning on continuing to do all of the Tasha subclasses, and if that goes well, maybe even all the subclasses in general. So, stay tuned for that in the next few years, make sure to subscribe, like, whatever. This video is a bit more chill. I just wanted to give you guys a break off of that kind of high-octane content and kind of flip it around just to talk to you guys for a little bit about something that I'm very passionate about. That is gatekeeping. Before I get to that, yes, this video was originally supposed to be the D&D class tier list. I'll make that video eventually. The issue is, when we streamed it over on my Twitch, I forgot to record it on OBS, and I don't have it set to record on Twitch, so that's gone. If you were there, you were there. If you weren't, you don't get to see those clips, but I'm sorry. I wanted to make that video, it just didn't quite happen. But anyway, something that I'm very passionate about, and that is gatekeeping in D&D. A lot of people will say, like, if you haven't been playing since 3.5, do you really play D&D, you know? If you don't know what aboleth is, do you really play D&D? You know, people will come after you, and be like, oh, well, you're not a real D&D fan. I'll be like, oh, you got the lore on the City of Brass wrong. I watched a Mr. Rex video. And people will try to say that you don't really play D&D, or you're not really a D&D fan. You can't call yourself that, you know, there's this gatekeeping. Let me just say, flat out, I put my foot down, don't do that. Don't gatekeep in an RPG, especially not D&D. The whole point of D&D 5e, especially, is how inclusive it is. Literally anyone can play D&D. Yo, I consider it playing D&D if you go to a McDonald's with character sheets that are just the napkins at the McDonald's table, you scribble down a couple stats, and you roll some d20s. Even if you don't have d20s. People in the military all the time take little slips of paper and write numbers on them, put them in a hat, and that's how they roll. Like, oh my gosh, like, don't gatekeep. Let anyone enjoy it. The whole point of D&D is anyone can be whoever they want to be. And so, like, yeah, you can respect someone like Mr. Rex, for instance, for knowing all of the Forgotten Realms lore, or knowing all of this lore and all of this, but, like, at the end of the day, home games are like the heart of D&D. I mean, Matthew Mercer in Critical Role, who is now one of the faces of D&D, Critical Role itself is one of the things that made D&D so popular in the last few years. He uses his own homebrew. Blood Hunter is homebrew. It's not, like, officially sanctioned, it's just his homebrew. Granted, it's cool, but, like, home games are where it's at. And these people that are saying, no, you're not a real D&D fan unless you know who Asmodeus is, or Asmodeus, you're not a real D&D fan. Don't let people do that. This brings me to another point, and that is, don't let people dictate how you play your game. Like, sure, all these power gamers are gonna be out there like, I made a fighter, rogue, ranger, multi-class that can't be seen unless you touch them. Like, just play a character you enjoy. Someone might not like monks, but if you like monks, then play one. Enjoy it. Embrace it. It's your thing. Don't let other people dictate how you play Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game where you can play however you want to, no matter how into it you are. If you want to play a character, just play that character. It doesn't matter if they're good or not. One of the most enjoyable characters that I've ever played with was named Janison. And his whole thing is he was like a snot-nosed coward. Granted, he wasn't like Zenitsu, he wasn't like disgusting, but like, he was a normal dude. How would you react if if suddenly you were thrown into this kind of eldritch fantasy with these massive creatures destroying buildings, and like, most people would be freaking scared, and it added a dynamic to the group that is so difficult to replicate. So just play whoever you want. Like, who cares if Tortle is best as a monk, or if Orc is best as a barbarian? Like, granted, if you want to play an Orc barbarian, or like a dwarf fighter, or like a human ranger, or something that's very vanilla, people will also come after you and be like, oh, you're playing white bread. Like, no! D&D is all about characters. It's all about development. It's all about having a good time with your friends. Some of the most fun I've had in D&D is when no one's taking it seriously at all. I played a druid whose spellcasting focus was a blunt. He would light it up, and he'd cast like fireball or whatever out of it, and he was just always high. And it was the funniest thing. I don't condone being high or drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. Don't do that. But, like, it's just so fun and funny. If you haven't seen it, I suggest that you watch the ice hockey story, which is, like, 10 videos back. It's also one of these kind of off-script story type of videos, but it has a nice little animation in the background and blah 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 blah. Anyway, the point is, that was one of the most memorable sessions probably of my entire life, and it's still a running gag in my group. There was a TikTok that was even made of it by a good friend of mine. Here that is. But yeah, and that like went viral. But the point is, fun is more important than the rules a lot of the times, and it's more important than gatekeeping. Just don't gatekeep. Okay, there is one kind of gatekeeping that I think is absolutely fine, and that is gatekeep the people that give D&D a bad name. Like, gatekeep the people that are gonna show up and attempt to, like, have sex with everything. The people that'll show up and just, like, ruin games. The people that, like, make the campaign all about them instead of trying to tell a group story with them as a part of it. You can gatekeep then. Like, that's understandable, and I'm not saying that it's not okay to say, okay, this player is causing more, you know, trouble than they're worth in the party, you know. If a player is constantly cheating, is fudging their dice rolls, if they're, you know, doing whatever, it takes away fun from everyone else. Not because they're less useful, just because, I don't know, people don't like cheating. I don't like, as a DM, to constantly be thinking, I wonder if that dice roll was accurate. I wonder if they're stealing the spotlight from someone else just because they fudged a dice roll. Like, it's fine to get rid of players that are destructive to your campaign. I had a player one time, I'm not going to say their name, obviously, but I talked to him beforehand, and we came up with this whole kind of plot scheme, and that is that, like, he is a cleric, but he is aligned neutral evil, and he's a life cleric, though. So it's this kind of, we had a death cleric that was neutral good, and a life cleric that was neutral evil. I talked to him, I basically said, your mission is to join up with the main party called the not the Knights of Ren, the Renegades, which is still one of my, because one of the main characters' name was Dak and Ren. So they became the Renegades, which I love. Their main mission was to join the Renegades and to acquire one of the legendary weapons that the Renegades had and bring it back to the church for their nefarious purposes. It was actually a Vorpal sword, right? It was also like a kind of homebrew, like Hexblade kind of a thing. So, it was to go get this legendary weapon and bring it back. Well, the thing is, he joined the Renegades, but right after that, other circumstances occurred, and they were all thrown into a portal to the Feywild, which is this beautiful plane, and there were some great set pieces there, and a really fun plot lining involving, like, a prophecy, and, anyway, that plot line is not even done. Yeah, we could go back to that campaign and finish that. Anyway, the point is, my ADHD is really showing in these off-script videos. Point is that their mission was to get the sword and bring it back to the church. And my idea was, this Feywild area would be like a forced peace, you know, like, he wouldn't be able to reveal himself, because if he did, where would he go? What would he do? And so then this whole arc would be a trust building between them until they get out of the Feywild, and then there's this sudden betrayal that's so raw, and, like, it was supposed to be, like, heart-wrenching and moving. And instead, what happened is, the very first night he spent with the Renegades in the Feywild, he just took the sword. Like, he rolled a stealth check, failed the first one, he's wearing full armor. The monk who had the sword woke up and was like, do you need something? And the guy's like, no, I'm just taking a piss. And then he does it again and rolls like an 18. And the monk's passive perception isn't that high. So, he just takes the sword and he just runs away. The next day, there was a green dragon encounter, and the monk reaches for his Vorpal katana, and it's just not there. And there was no reason to do that. It just didn't make sense. Where are you gonna go? What's your plan? Oh my gosh. And so he did that, and it was just that kind of one-dimensional character, and the party ended up just being sick of him, and they tied up his character to a tree. He played another character named Ezrin, but he was just a really stinky paladin. That was his whole thing. And he would just go, I sense evil, and he would just walk towards whatever it was. If there was a dungeon nearby, he'd be like, I walk towards the dungeon, and he would just go alone. And then it would always be the rest of them that would have to save him. And I know paladins are OP, but this was at level 6. Oh my gosh. Sorry, the Ezrin was before the evil cleric. So we basically, he got the party into a ton of dumb stuff. He basically just wanted to play his own solo campaign, and then the rest of the party do their own thing. And I wasn't about it, and the characters weren't about it. So we killed off Ezrin, and he picked up the cleric character. And after both of those mishaps, some of the party kind of approached me and were like, hey, we're having a lot less fun. And I, as a DM, was having a lot less fun trying to fit him in. We did actually say that he couldn't play in that campaign, which is always a hard thing to do, especially if you know them as a person. I love the guy as a person. He's so funny, and he's so he's such an amazing dude, but just not not fun to play with. And I guess it's fine to gatekeep in that sense. Look for the fun of the largest group of people in your campaign. But it's to tell people they can't play just because, oh, you don't know enough about D&D. If you're going to do a hardcore campaign only with the best of the best players, you can tell another player hey, you can join us, just be careful because it's going to be really hard and you'll have to take leads from the rest of the group. But don't be you're not good enough to play with us. No, dude. As long as they know how to roll a d20, let them play the game. Anyway, yeah, gatekeeping is stanky. No one likes it, especially in D&D. D&D, my first campaign I ran, that I consider to be D&D-esque, tabletop RPG, we didn't even have character sheets. We didn't even have dice. Literally, what would happen is I would just DM, I would just sit there, and my friends would just tell me what they did. And I would decide, just based off of their words or actions, how it would go. And then their character skills, because they told me what their character would want to be good at and what they want to be bad at. So yeah, just such interesting campaigns that would never have happened if someone was just oh, you don't get to do that. Why would you tell someone that they don't get to have fun? I don't get it. Anyway, this little rant video I feel like it's coming to a close. Once again, thank you so much for supporting my recent content. The series on the subclasses is going to continue. I just didn't have the time to edit one this week or come up with a script. This is just kind of an artistic cleanse week. Next week it'll be back in full force. I don't know what subclass it'll be. So if you have an idea on what subclass you'd like it to be, make sure to tell me down in the comments. I will actually follow those because I like it when you comment. I like talking to you guys. And if you're intimidated, don't worry. I'm weird, but I'm not that weird. I don't bite. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video or if you want to see more of this kind of content. And like if you liked, yada yada. Most importantly, more than anything, stay nerdy and have a great day.